I'm Ainsley Earhart.
I'm Charles Payne.
I'm Martha McCallum, and this is the Fox News Rundown.
Friday, February 26th, 2021. I'm Lisa Brady. This is a big weekend for the former president speaking at a conservative conference, but the stakes could be even higher for Republicans.
Donald Trump has got to figure out a constructive way that he can keep his party together without blowing up his party.
I'm Chris Foster. The coronavirus pandemic has a majority of kids in the country still attending school from home at least part of the time. In school full-time, a lot of kids at Catholic schools, including in the Boston area.
There's a lot of evidence in Catholic schools around the country and in other schools that have opened here and in Europe that there just simply isn't any substantial spread within schools. So there's no reason at all now for any school to be closed.
We speak with Boston Catholic School Superintendent Thomas W. Carroll.
And I'm Guy Benson. I've got the final word on the Fox News Rundown.
Before he says anything, former President Donald Trump is stirring debate among some Republicans about whether he should be speaking this weekend at the conservative gathering known as CPAC. The speech Sunday will be Trump's first since leaving office. Wyoming Congresswoman Liz Cheney, the House Republican Conference chair, says that speech is up to CPAC, but she tells reporters,
I've been clear in my views about President Trump and the extent to which following January 6th, I don't believe that he should be playing a role in the future of the party or the country.
Cheney is one of 10 House Republicans who voted to impeach Trump over the Capitol riot. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy says the former president should speak at CPAC, and reacting to Cheney's remarks, told Fox and Friends,
the idea that a Republican would join with the cancel culture, I just think is wrong.
The former president has released a few statements as a private citizen, including one this week after the U.S. Supreme Court handed years of tax records to a prosecutor in New York. He called that a continuation of the greatest political witch hunt in the history of our country. Another statement slammed the status quo in the GOP, and Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell in particular, after McConnell said Trump is practically and morally responsible for provoking the attack on the Capitol.
They did this because they'd been fed wild falsehoods by the most powerful man on earth.
That speech just after the Senate, including McConnell, voted to acquit Trump of incitement of insurrection in his second impeachment trial earlier this month. Banned from social media, though, the former president has been largely silent, drawing even more attention, perhaps, to the CPAC speech. So could it make or break Donald Trump's future in the Republican Party?
Well, I don't think it could make or break it. I think it could indicate what path he's going to choose.
Karl Rove is former Deputy Chief of Staff for President George W. Bush and a Fox News contributor.
I start with this assumption. If you've lost an election in the past, in order to win, you have to recast yourself. You have to say to people, I've changed. And the things that you didn't like about me, I've now turned them into strengths, or I'm doing things in a different way. And so if he's going to get out of the wilderness, I think he's going to have to act differently. So he's got two ways to go. One is to do what he would normally do, which is, angry about the election and say it was stolen and blame the media and go on an assault against his political enemies and tear down, the very weak Republicans who failed to support him and make it all about aggrievement and anger. And that'll rally the crowd. The crowd will go nuts. But that crowd is going to be several thousand people, in a room, as opposed to millions of Americans across the country who, after January 6th, started saying, well, I may have voted for him or not voted for him, but I'm soured on him after January 6th, and he won't be growing that crowd. He won't be changing those minds. He'll just simply be reinforcing the people who are already in his corner and will remain in his corner.
You actually wrote, I saw the Wall Street Journal piece about peril versus opportunity, and you made the point that he's got a shrinking share of the electorate that believes his every claim. So, as you say, there's a different way he could go. What would that be?
Well, it would be to offer a more optimistic, forward-looking vision. He would spend his time talking about what he would be doing and how he would make their lives better, if he were still president, contrasting it with the Biden administration. It would be to, draw attention to his pre-COVID economic achievements, and again, to talk about what he would be doing in the aftermath of COVID to build on it. On COVID, it would be to both strike a note of compassion, to finally do what he's never brought himself to do, which is to express in a personal and emotional way his sincere feelings about those who've suffered and those who've died. And he could herald Operation Warp Speed, saying, I'm one of the proudest achievements of my time in office is that we developed this vaccine in record time, and in the final week of my administration, we already hit the target, 1 million vaccinations a day, that my successor aimed for in his first 100 days. And it's because of it wasn't just me, it was all these people who made this possible. And he could look bigger by sharing credit. And then he could also do something that would be surprising, which is to acknowledge that Joe Biden is president and wish him well. Doesn't require him to say Joe Biden will do a better job than me, but it requires him to at least acknowledge what the American people are now acknowledging, which is the president who occupies the Oval Office is Joe Biden.
There certainly is a split in the Republican Party largely over him, and it was laid bare again this week when you contrast the things that House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy said versus what number 3 House Republican Liz Cheney said about whether he should have a future with the party or with the country at all. How big is the division among Republicans around the country, though? Is it as big as it seems just when you hear from different politicians? And is this speech a chance to begin bridging that divide?
Yeah, look, the media is going to seize on any indication, any whisper, any hint of Republican discord. So if he gets up and gives his traditional speech, I was robbed, and they're very weak Republicans who didn't support me, the media will be delighted because that's their storyline. Their storyline is the Republicans are involved in civil war, and Donald Trump is at war with his own party, and his own party is at war with him. And that ain't good. If, on the other hand, he stands up there and says, here's my agenda, here's what I would be doing, and contrasting it with what President Biden is doing, that would be the message, which is, here's what I'd be doing. And if he strikes these notes of compassion about people who suffered in COVID, if he acknowledges that President Biden is going to be the president for the next 4 years, and if he strikes a tone of, I know that I've got to win my way back into your confidence, and I will do so, that's going to be the storyline. So he gets to decide, and it's going to be a very important decision both for him and his future hopes and for the Republican Party.
Many Republicans have united around criticizing the new administration. Yes. And even though Democrats seem to think the more visible Trump is, the better it is for their party, he did bring a lot of voters into the GOP, though. And so isn't that always a risk to Democrats?
Oh, sure. Look, you're right. There are 3 risks here. One is that the Democrats think that they will have Trump to kick around, and that's all they need to do. So, he lost, therefore they can do extreme things and get away with them. That's sort of like Barack Obama, February of 2009. I won. I'm going to do a stupid stimulus bill. But everybody's going to like it at the end of the day. And then we had a revolt, and his party lost 63 seats in the U.S. House in 2010. The second challenge is going to be for Republicans, because the Republicans have 3 things they've got to simultaneously do. Keep involved the working class, blue-collar, middle America voters who began moving into the Republican Party 20-some-odd years ago and reached their peak with the election of Donald Trump. They've also got to rebuild their strength in the suburbs, which has ebbed in the last 4 years and which is absolutely vital to our continued success. And finally, they have to confront a diverse electorate. And it's not an accident that we had great success last fall by running a large number of women and Latinos and African Americans and Asian Americans for office. And that's particularly how we picked up seats in the U.S. House. So we've got to do that. The third thing is that, yes, Donald Trump has got to figure out a constructive way that he can keep his party together without blowing up his party.
I know that you've made the case already for the former president to focus on his accomplishments instead of his grievances with the speech this weekend. There's an Associated Press story that's describing CPAC as a gathering that's going to endorse his continued dominance in Republican politics and, quote, promote his false claim that he lost the election only because of widespread voter fraud. I mean, what do you say to Republicans who are very concerned about the future of the party at this point?
Well, if the president makes CPAC into that, and if CPAC allows itself to be turned into that, it will become even less relevant than it is today. Remember, CPAC doesn't have a particularly great record. 2011, then businessman Donald Trump made his first appearance at CPAC, and the presidential straw poll was won by Representative Ron Paul of Texas. In fact, I can't think of a CPAC that had a presidential straw poll winner ever nominated by the Republican Party. So if they come out and endorse this concept of the election was stolen, that is less believed today than it was last month, and less believed last month than it was the month previous to that. And as time goes on, more and more people are going to accept the fact that President Trump lost after 62 lawsuits, in which he won one on a minor question and lost 61 of them. The American people are going to just sort of say, you know what, that sounds like sour grapes, and he's not going to win additional votes. He lost that election by 7 million votes. So what by continuing to say it was stolen from me, he's only going to be speaking to the truly, to the true loyal base, and he's going to be involved in subtracting votes, not adding votes.
And there are congressional campaigns to think of right on the horizon in 2022.
Sure. Yep.
So again, I say, what hope would you give to Republican voters, about the future of the party, even looking ahead to those campaigns?
I'd say this. We lost the White House, but we came very close in the Senate, 50-50 tie. We did something that was unexpected, picked up seats in the U.S. House. And, I thought I was sort of wacky when I was suggesting that we would pick up 4 or 5 seats. We picked up 12. And, people were saying we're going to lose. Respected prognosticators were saying we were going to lose 18 or 19 or 20. We added to the number of state legislature chambers that we control. So, we got a lot of strength out there, and the country is narrowly divided. But it's going to be important not only for the party to emphasize, whether it's in President Trump's speech on Sunday at CPAC, what we're opposed to, but we also have to explain what we're for. And that's going to be particularly important in the congressional midterm elections. We're going to pick up seats in the House. And we're going to do okay in the Senate, even though we're defending 20 of 34. But to make them big victories, and we're defending 20 out of 36 seats in the governor's seats that are up, we've got to articulate what it is that we're for. The easy thing in politics is to say what you're against. The tougher thing is to say what you're for.
Karl Rove, we always appreciate your insights so much. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.
This is Guy Benson with your Fox News commentary coming up.
A year ago, a high school in Washington state shut down for 2 days when an employee's relative got sick and was tested for coronavirus. A month later, every public school in the country was closed because of the pandemic. And now, still more than halfway into the current school year, more than a third of American students K-12 are attending all remote classes, with about 40% in school in person every day and the rest something in between. Some parents and kids are fine with learning from home at least some of the time. A lot, though, are not and are pushing for everybody to be back in class. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy.
I do not understand why we cannot open the schools. The science says it, and now you've got the president, Joe Biden, thinks opening schools, his goal is 1 day a week. You cannot allow this to continue.
At least 1 day a week by the end of April is the White House goal. White House spokeswoman Jen Psaki also says a lot of school districts need more federal financial help.
Many schools across the country don't have the resources to be able to invest in improving facilities, on hiring more bus drivers, on hiring more temporary teachers so we can have smaller class sizes.
President Biden went to Catholic school growing up. If he was a kid now, he'd probably be in class in person like Catholic school kids in Boston have this whole school year.
It's actually gone remarkably well. We made the decision initially because we felt that it was important for the kids to be back with other children and with their teachers and to get back to learning the way they should. And it's been very successful, and we've been able to keep everyone safe.
Thomas W. Carroll is the superintendent of schools for the Catholic Archdiocese of Boston.
The one thing about Catholic schools is we're good at getting children to follow instructions, even without all the nuns that we used to have. And so that's actually been a great asset. So the kids are all in nice, neat, orderly rows. Nobody's, breathing into each other's face. Everybody's wearing a mask. We're keeping the buildings really clean and well ventilated. And following the health protocols have worked really, really well for us. We have virtually no cases of spread. Right now, we have 35,500 children and adults in our buildings across 100 schools, and we have literally only 4 cases.
And you can't even tell if the infections you're getting are from school contact. I mean, kids and teachers do have outside lives.
Oh, no. Yeah. So we have, right, no, exactly. So we characterize cases as outside-in cases, meaning somebody catches it on the outside in the broader community and then brings it into the school. So the test of the protocols is not preventing somebody outside from ever getting it. It's stopping it from spreading within the school.
Of course.
So right now across 100 schools, we only have 1 case of spread.
Great. How about stuff like lunch, recess, even just moving from class to class? You don't want kids congregating in the halls and talking, I guess.
Right. So we have the children stay put in their classroom, and then the teachers move instead of the children. But at this point, the cases in the background are plummeting. Boston, for example, they were up around 10-12% infection rate. They're now down below 4%. So as people get vaccinated, the background levels of COVID are dropping very dramatically in Massachusetts. And so certainly the worst of it is behind us. We went through the worst, and frankly, nothing bad happened. And so we feel vindicated that it was the right decision to reopen schools, and that our confidence that we could do so safely was borne out. There's a lesson in it for the school districts now, because there's a lot of evidence in Catholic schools around the country and in other schools that have opened here and in Europe that there just simply isn't any substantial spread within schools. So there's no reason at all now for any school to be closed. So individual kids may have to be still sent home from time to time, but a school overall, they should reopen all the schools across the country and get the kids back. Kids are going to lose a large portion of their education. We, for example, have one high school where kids that switched in from the public schools. This is a K through 12 setup between a elementary and a high school across the street from each other. And the parents uniformly from the public schools asked their kids to be held back in 8th grade because they frankly thought that their kids learned virtually nothing in the past year. That's a tragic waste of educational opportunity. But that's what's happening all across the country. Unfortunately, it's the price of people not allowing kids back in schools.
What did your teachers and kids say about when they were doing some remote learning compared to now? I assume some older kids may have been okay with it, but obviously it's night and day, like you said.
Yeah, it's a lot easier for older children, obviously. For younger children, it simply doesn't work well at all. And for preschool children, it completely does not work. The teachers, we did, when we closed, within 2 days, we were back up and running on remote. This is in the spring, providing education. It took the school districts 2 to 3 weeks to do that. And so we did the best we could, but we all knew that we were doing something that was not ideal. And once it was clear that things were not going to be as bad as we thought, and once we came to the conclusion that we could do it safely, as soon as we had the green light from Governor Baker, we just figured out how to get back open. We never had to decide whether we wanted to open because everybody knew intuitively that what was going on was not ideal for kids. And so we just didn't want to waste any more time.
And you've said that, look, we're ready at a moment's notice to shut down individual schools if you had to, but have you come close to having to make any of those decisions?
No, in fact, the reverse. I mean, there are individual schools that have closed. Like, for example, we have had high schools temporarily. We have had high schools where early on in September, a bunch of high school kids have a big party. 100 people show up. We don't know who attended the party. Nobody's wearing masks. And then we had to make a decision to close the school for 2 weeks for fear that we had no idea who would be contaminated or not. And some of the older kids had younger brothers in other grades, and it was cutting across a lot of grades. But those kind of situations. And after breaks, we've had some issues. And so some schools have decided to kind of delay reopening. But it's a lot of this kind of bobbing and weaving to get through the year. But the overarching goal is to be in session every day that we can across the Archdiocese and all of our schools. And because we all believe in the value of in-person instruction. Now, we have at the same time invested tremendous amount of money in technology so that we have the ability to live stream any class. So when a school does have to go remote temporarily, if it's an entire school or entire class or entire grade, we have the ability to continue seamlessly the instruction. Similarly, from the beginning, we pledged to parents, if they had an elderly person in the household or somebody who was medically compromised, and thus it was not safe for the kid to be going in and out of the house all the time, that we would find a way to educate their children anyway. And so those children we've live streamed. We also had some nervous moms and dads who in the beginning weren't sure how it was going to play out and held their kids back. We still provided education to their children through live streaming classrooms. And then what happened inevitably, which I predicted, is the kids saw all of their friends in class and started badgering their parents to be back in person. And so within a couple of weeks, most of the kids were in school, except people who had medical issues. Basically, it's kind of an instrument of letting parents decide what worked best for them. 95% of the parents wanted their kids in school all the time, whenever it was safe to do so, and that's what they did.
I assume in the beginning, just like parents, you had teachers who were nervous to be back in the classroom who maybe over time said, you know what, this is fine, I'm going to get back to work.
So some of the teachers were nervous, and part of that depended on their age and so forth. But we took the position as an archdiocese that the job of a teacher requires you to be in the classroom. And so if you're choosing that you're not going to come into a classroom, then we'll hire another person. And so we did have that, in a small percentage of cases. But the great bulk of teachers, and I think they frankly were heroic, because all of these teachers have parents of their own, and they've got children and families and so forth. So a lot of talk has been about, the cops and the firefighters and the frontline healthcare workers. But in many ways, teachers are healthcare workers too. And the teachers who really stood up over this school year have been the Catholic school teachers all across the country, with the exception of California, where Gavin Newsom, the governor, wouldn't allow any school to open, bizarrely. You've had Catholic teachers showing up every day. And the reason is partly the religious mission of our schools, which is we believe every child was created in the image and likeness of God. And if you believe that authentically, you cannot allow children to be stranded. And so we just simply wouldn't do it. And so we made a decision based on what was in the interest of children, not what was in the interest of adults. And overwhelmingly, the parents agreed with that decision. We're now in an enrollment cycle for the fall, and we're already getting record levels of enrollment for September, because we got a first wave. More than 4,000 parents from the public schools switched into our schools beginning in July, when the districts announced they were not going to open on time and they were going to go remote. And now we're seeing a second wave of parents who, frankly, looking back, regretted that they didn't make that decision last September to switch to us, and are now switching to us because they do not trust the education that their kids are receiving. And a lot of the school districts haven't committed to reopen in the fall. And so that's a big concern to an awful lot of parents. So we, the Catholic Church, we welcome everybody into our schools. You don't have to be Catholic to go to a Catholic school. And so we have open arms for anybody who is dissatisfied where they are and they want to try something different. And know that if we've got through this pandemic year staying open, there's no way we're not going to be open next year.
Thomas Carroll, Superintendent of Schools for the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Boston. Mr. Carroll, congratulations on a successful school year. Good job.
Thank you. Much appreciate it.
From the Fox News Podcasts Network. In these ever-changing times, you can rely on Fox News for hourly updates for the very latest news and information on your time. Listen and download now at foxnewspodcast.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Rate and review the Fox News Rundown on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen.
And now, some good news with Tanya J. Powers. Many of us were captivated by NASA's Perseverance rover during its landing on Mars last week, but now we're learning about a secret message it contained. It was right there in plain sight on the parachute the rover used. The Associated Press reports that systems engineer Ian Clark, who is a puzzle lover, used a binary code to spell out "Dare Mighty Things" in the orange and white strips of the 70-foot parachute, and included the GPS coordinates for the mission headquarters in Pasadena, California. He's a crossword hobbyist, and he came up with the idea a couple of years ago. Engineers had wanted an unusual pattern in the parachute fabric so they'd know how it was oriented during the rover's descent. So Clark turned it into a secret message, one that only about 6 people knew about before the landing. It only took a few hours for space fans to figure it out. Perseverance also has a plaque that depicts all 5 of NASA's Mars rovers in increasing size over the years, kind of like those family car decals here on Earth. And according to Deputy Project Manager Matt Wallace, there are more so-called Easter eggs coming. He says to pay attention when the rover's robotic arm is deployed and when the rover is driving, which should be in the near future. Tanya J. Powers, Fox News.
It's time for your Fox News commentary.
Guy Benson.
What's on your mind?
Apparently, even San Francisco has its limits for madness. Recently, the school board in the city was spending its time voting to strip problematic or offensive names off of schools in the district. These names included George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Paul Revere, and even Dianne Feinstein. With kids suffering and isolated at home, these supposed adults were prioritizing woke nonsense, like chiseling the name of the man who freed the slaves off of an empty building where students aren't learning anything. For many parents, it was all too much. And following a major outcry and rumblings about a recall effort, the school board has decided to pause any of these changes and review them further. And in the meantime, focus on getting the schools reopened. Imagine that. It looks like the pressure campaign has injected a little bit of sanity into this insane situation. The fight isn't over, but this is a step in the right direction.
This is Guy Benson, host of The Guy Benson Show.
You've been listening to the Fox News Rundown. Stay up to date by subscribing to this podcast at foxnewspodcasts.com. And for up-to-the-minute news, go to foxnews.com. From the Fox News Podcasts Network, subscribe and listen to the Trey Gowdy Podcast. Former federal prosecutor and 4-term U.S. Congressman from South Carolina brings you a one-of-a-kind podcast. Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com.
Love Fox News? Click the subscribe button to get more of the news and opinion you trust. And click the Fox News Rundown playlist for the latest episodes.